Hi guys, this is Dr. Jackman, and today I want to talk a little bit about the menstrual cycle. And the reason why I chose the menstrual cycle today is because I believe that over the next couple of weeks I'm going to delve into infertility and IVF treatments, and a lot of it will make more sense if you understand the menstrual cycle. I will not give you the too many medical jargons. I'm going to break it down as simplified as I possibly can, and going forward, I will refer back to some of these terms and I may re-explain them, because a lot of the medication and a lot of what we do in IVF really stems from knowing the menstrual cycle. So what is the menstrual cycle? The menstrual cycle is not just the period, though it does start with your period or your menses. So it's the ability to prepare your body for a possible pregnancy, okay? So this starts with the period, and it's divided into two sets of phases, and there are two things happening simultaneously. One phase occurs in the ovary, and then the other simultaneously you have something occurring in the uterus as well. So in the beginning of the cycle, you have in the ovary the follicular stage happening, which means that you're developing follicles. Follicles contain eggs that we need. And in the uterus, simultaneously, when the follicular phase is happening in the ovary, simultaneously in the uterus you have the proliferative phase, meaning that the uterus lining is getting bigger for possible implantation. So both of them are happening at the same time in conjunction with each other, just in different parts of the body. In the middle of the cycle, you have ovulation. Ovulation is more or less when you have a raise in a particular hormone called LH, and that causes you to ovulate, which is to release the egg. And then you go into the second phase, which in the ovary, the second phase is now called the Luteal Phase, and in the uterus, the second phase is now called the secretory phase. So I'm going to go through each one by one, but that was just a general overall breakdown. So as I said, we started with a period, you've shed your lining completely, you're bleeding, and now in the ovary, you're in the follicular phase. So in the follicular phase, you want to grow follicles. So your body recruits, like awakens some of the follicles in the ovary to start growing, and then it selects one. This one is going to become what we call a dominant follicle, and it's going to be the one follicle that it will eventually ovulate and release its egg, so that you can potentially get pregnant if you're trying. You can potentially get pregnant even if you're not trying, but you understand what I mean. So that dominant follicle, or those follicles, are growing in the follicular phase in the ovary, and what's causing them to grow is a hormone released from the brain, from the pituitary in the brain, called FSH, follicular stimulating hormone. As the name suggests, it stimulates the follicles to grow. Follicular stimulating hormone. So now your follicles are growing in your ovary. One eventually is selected to become the main one that's going to be growing, mainly growing, and the others will eventually die off. And while it's growing with FSH, it's producing estrogen. So the follicles are producing estrogen. This is how it talks back to the brain, and it gives what we call a feedback mechanism. At the same time, in your uterus, your lining, the endometrial lining, which had previously shed in your period, that's now starting to build up and grow and thicken due to hormonal responses as well. So estrogen that your ovary is producing is causing the lining to grow. So it's kind of cool how everything is just feeding back to each other and having the system working. So then at around, if you have a regular 28-day cycle, but regular is not just 28, just an average, but if you have a 28-day cycle, like around day 12, day 13, the brain, the pituitary in the brain, also secretes another substance called LH, luteinizing hormone. And this hormone, as it spikes, tells that dominant follicle, the one that's big, and now it's probably around 20 millimeters, and it's right about to ovulate. And what helps it is this LH, luteinizing hormone. It tells the follicle, okay, you're going to ovulate now. And what the whole process is doing is that the egg inside the follicle is getting mature. It undergoes, it completes what we call meiosis 1, goes into meiosis 2. You don't need to know the technical of that, just knows that that's how the egg is mature. And once it's stuck in meiosis 2, that's the way we can fertilize an egg. We can't fertilize if it's meiosis 1, it's too immature. So that LH helps the egg to get mature, go into meiosis 2. We call that an M2 egg. And if you're in the fertility process, you hear us refer to M2 eggs all the time. That's what we mean, meiosis 2. and then the cells around it, the supporting cells around it expand. The egg is released into the follicular fluid, and the final part is that you ovulate, which is the follicle ruptures and releases that egg into the body. That egg could eventually be picked up by the fallopian tube, travel along the fallopian tube, which is your tubes, towards the uterus. And if you have sex at the right time and the sperm is able to meet the egg, there's potential for you to get pregnant. So after ovulation now, the egg is released. Now that phase in the ovary is called the luteal phase, because what was the follicle now forms what we call a corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is very, very important, especially if you do get pregnant, because it secretes progesterone and some estrogen, but the importance is progesterone, and progesterone helps to stabilize the endometrium to help with pregnancy. So progesterone is very important, and that the follicle that was just ruptured secretes this to help you support that pregnancy. As I said, everything is intertwined, working with each other. At the same time, so this is the second phases I'm talking about now, ovary, luteal phase. At the same time in your uterus, you have the proliferative phase. We had that already. Sorry, we have the secretory phase. So in the secretory phase, you have special substances being secreted into the endometrial lining. Now it's thick. It was thickened from the phase before, from the proliferative phase before, but now in the secondary phases, it's secreting glycogen storage granules. So if the embryo implants, it has like a lot of nutrition around it. It's secreting prostaglandins. Now, if you do get pregnant, the secretion of prostaglandins decrease. If you don't get pregnant, guess what the prostaglandins do? It causes the uterus to contract, and if you don't get pregnant, it contracts. You get your period. So it starts all over again. So just to recap, you have 4 phases, 2 happening in the beginning at the same time, 1 in the ovary, 1 in the uterus, and then 2 happening after ovulation at the same time, 1 in the ovary, 1 in the uterus. So you start off with your period, the ovaries going into follicular phase, growing follicles, the uterus at that same time is growing the lining. You ovulate, release the egg, and now the ovaries are in the luteal phase to support a pregnancy, while the uterus is in the secretory stage, secreting glycogen storage granules and prostaglandins and stuff like that, just in case it supports a pregnancy, prostaglandins if it's not supporting. So we will continue this a little bit more further on when we go more in depth in IVF, but this is just a basic overview of the menstrual cycle. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll answer them. Bye.